Praise the Lord, brothers and sisters, and thank you very much for joining us in this video. We hope and pray you and your families are well. Hopefully you've had a great week and an even more of an enjoyable weekend, and prayerfully you're ready and excited about going into another week. We are always to have a positive outlook. I know it's Sunday and we sometimes dread Mondays, but go into your week expecting the great blessings of God. All right. So we just want to update you on a few things. We are planning for our reopening services on this coming Sunday at 1 p.m. And we are going to have our first service in person since, I believe, March. So it's been a long time coming. But we do think that we are more aware and we have the proper capabilities to keep everyone safe in this particular season. So we ask you to please, if you are coming, please bring your mask, okay? Please make sure you are well, you don't have a fever, you don't have any symptoms, and please make sure you're thinking within the best interest of everyone that will be joining us in this service, okay? We're going to have a Bible study on Wednesday, as we always do. It's going to be live, and it's going to give you opportunity to find out more about the guidelines, the practices that we will be implementing to make sure we all stay safe, all right? So make sure you tune in either on YouTube or you can tune directly in on our Zoom conference call to ask any questions or give any feedback or any helpful hints that you would care to share, all right? But please take a moment to follow us in the Bible study on Wednesday to get more information about that. Also, we were able to do the food box giveaway in King Street on Friday, and that was a wonderful experience together with some of the individuals in the community. Had an opportunity to speak with people, hear hearts, and see what was going on there in King Street. And prayerfully, there'll be some that may be even able to attend our services. So we ask that you would pray for those who are recipients of those boxes, that the Lord will not just provide food, but also provide a message of the hope of Jesus Christ. All right. So we ask you to pray for that. Well, brothers and sisters, we are going to take a few moments to just go through a few verses that I think will be a blessing to you. Hopefully it will. I want to encourage you, and I want to give you some very practical but very useful information from the Word of God. And it's going to come from Daniel chapter 3, verse 14 through verse number 18. I'm going to invite you to please pull out your Bibles, pull out your phones, get your notepads, get you some paper, get you your app, or whatever you use to take notes. And let's do this together. Let's take a few moments to just isolate ourselves out from everything else that's going on in the day. And let's take a few moments in the Word of God. I'm going to look at Daniel chapter 3, verse 14 through verse number 18. Of course, as we always do, we're going to read from the New Living Translation, but I would prefer or suggest and even invite you to read from whatever translation you would prefer. All right. So let's look at Daniel chapter 3, verse 14. It says, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I have made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you'll be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And then what God will be able to rescue you from my power?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." These are very bold words from the, as we like to call them, the three Hebrew boys. And we want to read these verses and consider the thought for today. What if? All right. What if? Now, we've all heard this story. I'm pretty sure of it. In fact, this was one of my favorite stories as a child growing up. We had the opportunity to hear about this story in Sunday school. We even heard sermons over these passages, and the confidence that was demonstrated by these three men is something to be valued. It's something to be strongly considerate of. And we often want to take applications from this, obviously, because it's a very easy principle based book, a very principle based text. But I want hopefully to just use this text to, if not at the very least, just remind you about our responsibility and the power of God, and kind of just look at this and see how this all works out. Because sometimes we have these ideas in our mind, and then when we face the struggle, it becomes fairly difficult to try to apply this in a very practical way. All right, so let's take a look at it. We look at this text, and in Daniel chapter 3, what we're seeing is this empire that was appointed by God. God established this empire. And what's so abnormal about it is what they would call a pagan empire. It is an empire that God raises up to chastise his people. And in the midst of this, the people of God are going through such a tremendous amount of oppression, difficulty. Things are falling apart. Nothing is normal. It sounds much like the pandemic, right? Where nothing is normal, where we don't feel at home. We're not in a place where we can say we are comfortable and things are as it has always been. We are tested on every side. And really the only thing we have to grab a hold of is the power and our faith in God, all right? And it is a very practical book for that reason. We read these pages in the book of Daniel, and immediately we can relate, because if not corporately, if not universally, if we're not in a pandemic, just personally, we often feel that we are in a space and in a place where we have nothing to hold on to. Family isn't there. Our job isn't working out. The degrees we received, it doesn't seem to pay off as much as we thought it would. Friends are not what friends have always been. And it just seems though we all reach a point in our lives where God gives us this perfect opportunity to see him for who he really is and understand it for ourselves, what it means to be a believer and a person that puts their trust and confidence in God, right? And this is where these three young men are. And what's so amazing about it is they're in this position where whatever they had before they got there, it's going to be the thing that they need to get them through where they are right now. All right. And so I want to encourage everyone, don't wait till you get to a struggle. Don't wait till you get into a fight. Don't wait until you face a battle to try to develop the thing you need in order to survive. You need to have what you need for the future in you right now. All right. We call it in the medical field preventive things, preventive visits, preventive medication, getting your vitamins, getting the resources you need. So whenever your body becomes attacked with a sickness, then you'll have what you need inside already to fight the sickness before it even comes. All right. And so we're going to see these young men demonstrate incredible values, incredible discipline, and incredible character in this particular situation. But when it all comes down to what is being done here, when it is all boiled down to what they are demonstrating, there's one word that can describe everything that is demonstrated by these three Hebrew boys. And that one word is worship. It is worship. And when you look at these young men, out of all the things that we can say about them, the one thing that we can say about them that will cover it all is that they were tremendous worshipers of the God of Israel. They knew what it meant to worship God. Now, when we look at the text, we understand that by their example, that worship is not just simply an expression. You know, when we say let's go worship, we mean let's go sing, let's go play an instrument, let's wave our hands, let's clap our hands, let's, have an experience. But the three Hebrew boys, they show us that worship is the involvement of our heart, our mind, our soul. In fact, it is the involvement of our very being into the worship of the Creator, the God of heaven and earth. And what I want us to see is that is important. When we talk about worshiping, when we're saying we are worshipers, if our worship does not incorporate and involve our entire being, and it is simply limited to an expression, what we discover is that whenever we get in situations like what these young men were facing, we don't have what it takes to worship God in those difficult situations, because we are only worshiping through expression and not through being. We're worshiping through expression and not with our heart, mind, and soul and our spirits. OK, so when you talk about being able to worship, being able to survive difficult things in your life, you have to put your all into it. You have to put your entire existence into worshiping God in order for you to do it during those times where it's not most ideal. All right. And so what they do here is they're in this particular environment. Again, it is very unstable, and a commandment comes through from the government, by the way. The commandment from the government comes by their way saying, whenever the music begins to play, you are supposed to rise up and, well, fall down, bow down and worship the golden statue of Nebuchadnezzar. Well, if you know anything about the law of Moses, it prohibited any sort of idolatry. There was only one person who was supposed to receive the worship of the nation of Israel, of any Israelite during the time. And that was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that is because he revealed to them that he was the only God through the Exodus that happened during the days of their forefathers. And because of that revelation, their worship was supposed to be reserved only for the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So these three Hebrew boys, knowing the way and knowing the method of life, if you will, the way that they should live, they forbid themselves from worshiping this statue of Nebuchadnezzar. They say, no, we're not going to do it. And so what happens is the word gets to Nebuchadnezzar. He calls the boys to him, and he says, I've heard that you won't worship and fall down before the golden statue. And he says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Because I'm feeling kind of nice today, I'm going to give you one more chance to correct this error and do what you should have done before. In verse number 15, he actually says, I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I've made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. All right. Now, the thing that I want us to understand is whenever it gets to this point in your life, and we're all going to have this sort of circumstance. We might not get it from the government. We may not get it from, some leader, some political figure. But all of us are going to be put in a position where we are given the ultimatum. It's going to be you either worship God or you worship whatever the other thing is. It may come in the form of this. You either take this position in life or you sacrifice yourself and you worship God and you turn away from the pleasures of the world. It may be in the form of a job or a business opportunity or a spouse or some sort of obtaining of funds or material goods. All of us, in some point in our lives, we will face a moment where we have to choose between the worship of God and the worship of some other God that does not really exist. And the question we have to all answer is, what if? Because the way we answer that question, what if, will determine if we worship God or the other thing that's trying to replace God in our lives. And the question, what if, is so important is because we have this thing in our mind that we're facing, right? And the question is that we're facing is, if I choose God, what if I choose God? What is going to happen? If I choose God, will I get this? Will this work out for me? Will my life go this way? What if I actually go with God, which is where I know I need to go? What is going to happen? All right. Well, here's what happens with the three Hebrew boys. And because they answered this question correctly, they actually get a miraculous outcome. All right. And so I want to propose to you that it is essential that you answer the what if question correctly, because it is the make or break thing in your life. It is the thing that either causes you to sink or swim. All right. The way you answer the what if question is going to determine how your life goes from there on. OK. All right. Now, so let's look at it. I'm going to give you 3 points from verses 15 through verses number 26. And we're going to read through these kind of in a, it's not going to be in order, but we're going to get it. We're going to get the point of it all. OK. The first thing I want to show you is the reason why they were able to answer the what if question correctly is because they understood the ability of God. All right. So here's the first thing. You have to be able to approach the question not on the basis of will he, right? Because if we say to ourselves, he will, and that's why I'm doing it, then if he doesn't, then our life falls apart. And that's a part of the what if question. Yes, it would be great if he does what we want him to do. But what if he doesn't do what he wants us to do? This puts a bit of a turn in the way we worship. Worship is not supposed to be done on the basis of what God will do. It's supposed to be based on the understanding of what God is able to do. All right, I'll say that again. Worship is never supposed to be based on what God will do. If you're waiting for God, if you're waiting to worship God on the basis of what he will do, you may wait the rest of your lives. Worship is supposed to be done on the basis of what God is able to do. We serve and worship our God because we know he is the great God that can do anything, anywhere, at any time. The ability of God is what makes him so worship worthy. He is so worthy. He is so deserving because he is able to do anything we need him to do. And I want to show you that because when you look at verse number 15 through verses 26, it starts by saying in verse number 17, as they begin their explanation, it says, if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. They start with he is able and they move into he will. I think what happens a lot of times is when we're trying to develop our faith and our courage, what we often do is we start with the he will and then we move into the he's able. And because we don't have the strength of the he's able, we fall short in the portion of he will because our mind isn't fixed and it's not thinking about it correctly. You have to start with the proposition. The proposition is not what he will do, but what he's able to do. God is able to do anything I need him to do. And because of that alone, I'm going to worship him. As you build your life around that premise, what begins to happen is you begin to act on that in everyday life. OK, all right. So think about it this way. The three Hebrew boys were able to say what they did and said here. It's because they understood something about their God that was passed on to them by their fathers. And it's simply that I know of a God who can move nations out of empires, who can move whole bodies of people from oppression and from slavery. And if he's able to do that, then I must believe he's able to get me out of this. And I believe because he's able to get me out of this, I believe he will get me out of this. See how faith works? You see how worship works? I want to say this to you. Worship, brothers and sisters, is not just a matter of personal living. It is actually a corporate declaration. Our personal worship is a corporate declaration. It says to the world, I know of a God that can do and is able to do anything I need him to do. And because of that, I bow down to him only. OK, so let me give you the first point. It says in the first point, and this is in verse number 15, the three Hebrew boys understood that Israel's God is the only God that can deliver. Look at what it says in verse number 15 to verse number 18. And I guess we've read this. I'll break it down a little further than that. Verse number 16 says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. All right. We don't need to worry about what you're saying. Here's the thing that made them say this. In verse number 15, after telling them the consequence that they would have to serve if they don't bow down, he asked them a question. What God will be able to rescue you from my power? OK, and their answer is we know one who can do it. But it's not a matter of if he can or will do it, should we say, if he will do it. It's just a point that he can do it. OK, he can rescue us. And for that reason, we won't bow down to your statue. In other words, they're saying is your statue cannot add any value to my life. Now, I want to ask you this, brothers and sisters. What are the things we are trusting in the most? What are they adding to our lives? What is that job that you're hoping will give you all the money in the world? What is it adding to your life right now? What is that girl or that boy, that spouse or, that relationship that you're hoping is going to give you everything in life you could ever imagine? What is it adding to you right now? What is it that the cars and the houses and the things, what are they adding to you right now? The thing that we have to answer is, in comparison to God, what are all these other things adding to us? And the truth is, if we step back a moment and put our feelings to the side, put our egos to the side, we'll understand that there's nothing in life that adds more value to us than God. It is the fact that God gives us these things that makes them valuable, not the other way around. OK, so when we look at this text, they're saying something. They're saying we know a God that is better than this God that you're proposing. And because of that, we won't bow. We only bow to the one who is worthy. The next point I want to bring to you is Israel's God is the only God that will get in the fire with you. All right. Now, I'm going to be quite transparent, and I hope you'll be honest, too. But I believe that there are some people out there that'll be honest with me and say that you have found yourself in some very difficult situations. All right. I think back over 2020, and aside from the coronavirus, that has nothing to do with it. Just life, just situations, things, they were just difficult to deal with. Right. And what happens in life generally is we find ourselves in problems that we cannot get ourselves out of. And what we don't necessarily need, or even if we do need it, what we desire is not just somebody that'll take us out, but someone that will get in it with us. All right. And what we find is that Israel's God is the only God that would jump in the mess with you. He's the only God that would jump in the struggle with you in order to bring deliverance. Look what happens. They take the 3 Hebrew boys because they refuse to bow down. They throw them into the furnace. Everyone is getting burned up because the furnace is so hot. Clothes are being put into flames, and people are just being completely destroyed by this furnace that is just so hot. But what happens is, as they are in there, Nebuchadnezzar jumps up and he says in verse number 24, didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace? He says, wait a minute. I know when I gave the order, there were 3 men that were supposed to be in that furnace. And they responded. Everyone agreed. They says, yes, your majesty, we certainly did. But verse number 25 says, look, Nebuchadnezzar shouted, I see 4 men unbound. Now, notice they were bound when they were thrown in there, but now they are unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed. And the 4th looks like a god. Brothers and sisters, I want you to be encouraged for just a quick moment. And I want you to understand and accept the fact that you serve such a wonderful God, that he just doesn't sit in the sky and sit in the heavens and just wait and see what's going to happen and says, no, just leave it to them. I'll send someone down. But we serve a God that will, in all of his majesty, all of his splendor, all of his holiness, he'll come down. And I hate to even say that because it implies that he's not present. But what I should say is he will, in all of his splendor and majesty, he will jump in the problems with you. He will jump in the fire with you and make it so that while you're in the struggle, you will not be harmed by any of the things that are supposed to harm you. It's not that the fire will lose its strength. It's the fact that because God was in it with them, nothing could harm them as it normally would. And that's going to bring me to my 3rd point. Israel's God is the only God that can allow you to go into a situation and send you out of the problem without having any trouble at all. It's one thing to say, you know what, I went through a problem, I got beat up, I got some scars, and here you can see where I've been through something. But God can fix it so much so that whenever you get out of the problem that was supposed to destroy you and damage you and hurt you and harm you, after you get out of the problem, you'll find out all the things that were supposed to harm you and damage you and hurt you, they were not able to affect you because God was there in it with you. All right. It's an amazing thing. When we look at the text, we see Israel's God doing all of this. But here's the thing that I want to bring back to your attention. What if they would not have answered the question correctly? What if they would have bowed down to the golden statue and they would have done what everyone else did? It's the fact that they answered the what if question correctly. They looked at it and said, there's no God better than my God. There's no God worthy of the praise, honor, and the worship. So even if he doesn't save us, we're not worshiping on the basis of if he will. We're worshiping him on the basis of what he can and is able to do. There's one other thing I want to show you here, and I thought was very powerful. The text says here that there was a fourth one there, and Nebuchadnezzar called the three out, and they came out. And when I looked at this text, the thing that's so amazing to me is that it's not just about three Hebrew boys that got delivered. It's actually an explanation and actually a shadow, if you will, an Old Testament reference to what Jesus does for every one of us. If you notice, the three Hebrew boys were called out, but it never said and it never gave us any further understanding of what happened to the fourth one that was there with him. He called out the three, but the fourth one remained there in the fire. And this is what I want to show you, and I want you to take away from this. It is not that, it is the amazing fact that Jesus is seen in this text of taking all of the pain, all of the heat, all of the damage. He is the one able to take it all, so that by going through all of these terrible things, we are unable to be affected. It is the purest and probably one of the most profound explanations of intercession in the Old Testament that we could ever find. Because as the text says, the Holy Spirit intercedes on our behalf because of what Jesus has done for us, being that mediator between us and God. He is the intercessor. We have now an intercessor on our behalf. And because of that, we can't be harmed. Nothing can come against us. Nothing can stop us. All right. I want to encourage you, brothers and sisters, to answer the what if question correctly. Do everything you can in that moment where you will be tested to answer that what if question. What if he doesn't do it? Answer that question correctly with your heart, with your soul, with your whole being. And I want you to see how God will allow that opportunity to glorify himself and save you from whatever it is that you will face. All right. Brothers and sisters, I thank God for you. I hope this has been a blessing to you. I hope you have been encouraged. I hope you have been given inspiration to answer the what if question correctly, because I believe that God has something great planned for all of us if we will just worship him in spirit and in truth. All right. Well, until next time, thank you for watching. Have a blessed week. Be safe. And we look to see you on this coming Sunday. Until then, God bless.